Before I start this video, I want to tell everybody to like and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 30 subscribers before the college football season ends. Most people watching this probably know Bo Nix is one of the best quarterbacks in the nation and now a Heisman candidate. But before he got to Oregon, his career went through some ups and downs and through some criticism. Now, before I talk about Bo Nix's college career, I want to speak briefly about his high school career. In high school, Nix accumulated over 12,000 total yards and 161 touchdowns, all while winning 2 state titles and breaking many Alabama high school records. This led to him being rated as a 4-star by 24/7 Sports and a 5-star by both On3 and Rivals Network. Nix then committed to Auburn, which, fun fact, is the alma mater of his dad, Patrick Nix. Now, at Auburn, he enrolled early in January and then won a starting job in August, beating out now Texas State quarterback TJ Finley and now Tennessee Titans quarterback Malik Willis. Nix was going to be the first true freshman quarterback since 1946 to start for Auburn during the season opener. And his first start was going to come against the number 11th ranked Oregon Ducks, led by star quarterback Justin Herbert. Now, late in the game, Auburn trailed Oregon, but that was no problem. Bo Nix ended up throwing the game-winning pass, boosting Auburn's record to 1-0 and upsetting the number 11 ranked Oregon Ducks. Now, you would think after this game, his freshman season would just go perfectly great, but it didn't. It had its ups and downs. But at the end of the season, Bo Nix did the most important thing. He led Auburn to a win over the top-ranked Alabama team. Alabama at this time was ranked in the top 6. And if Alabama was to go on and beat Auburn, they would have had a good chance of making the college football playoffs. Now, Bo Nix ended his freshman season with a loss to Minnesota in the Outback Bowl, but his stats at the end of his true freshman season ended up being 2,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions. Now, the next season will be Bo Nix's best season at Auburn, but the numbers are a little bit skewed because of the pandemic that impacted the amount of games that Bo Nix ended up playing, as he only played 11 games, 2 less games than the previous year. His best game that season came against Kentucky, where he passed for 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had a good performance against LSU, where he passed for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns also, and including one rushing touchdown against them. Now, the season would end on a bad note as Auburn fired longtime head coach Gus Malzahn, and then Auburn lost in a bowl game to Northwestern. Auburn would then hire Brian Harsin, who before getting hired at Auburn would coach at Boise State for 6 seasons. And with this hire, this would mark the beginning of the end for Bo Nix's time at Auburn. Bo Nix's best game under Brian Harsin came against the Arkansas Razorbacks, where he had over 290 yards and threw for 2 touchdowns that game. But his best play that season came against LSU, where he scrambled right, then reversed and scrambled left, broke a tackle, then threw a touchdown pass. Nix would then injure his ankle a couple games later and end his season and end his tenure at Auburn. Now, remember how I said Brian Harsin's hiring was the beginning of the end for Bo Nix's tenure at Auburn. Well, check out these comments that he had to say after he entered the transfer portal. Nix's comments would say, "Last year, I was just kind of over it. Each week it was something else. There was quite frankly nothing I could do about it. I just remember kind of being miserable. It wasn't fun anymore." Now, outside of Brian Harsin, another reason why Bo Nix just wasn't successful at Auburn was, one, because his offensive line wasn't very good after his true freshman season, and 2, his wide receivers his last season at Auburn struggled with drops. So Nix went from a guy that was a 5-star coming out of high school and viewed as a guy that can turn Auburn around and make them title contenders year after year to a potential bust that struggles with inconsistencies all the time. But that changed whenever he committed to Oregon under head coach Dan Lanning and offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham. But that move saw some backlash because since Justin Herbert left, Oregon struggled with finding a consistent quarterback. And that was not Bo Nix at Auburn, so it was viewed as just getting another inconsistent quarterback. And the critics seemed right after Bo Nix's first game, as in Bo Nix's first game as an Oregon Duck. He played Georgia, number 1 ranked Georgia, one of the top defenses in the country. And you know what happened? He threw 2 interceptions and had no touchdowns, and Oregon struggled to even score a point. I think they had 3 points that game. But after that, things took a turn for the best for Bo Nix. As against Washington State just a couple weeks later, Bo Nix threw for 428 yards and 3 touchdowns, but that's not even the best performance he had that season. Couple weeks after the Washington State game against number 9 ranked UCLA, Bo Nix balled out, throwing for 283 yards and 5 touchdowns while all of America was watching, as College Game Day was at this game, and it was the primetime slot for the morning games. Nix also led them to wins over Utah later on, which Utah eventually went on to become Pac-12 champions, and they beat North Carolina in a bowl game, marking Bo Nix's first bowl win. Now, Oregon season didn't end how they wanted it to. They ended the season 10-3, but they lost to their two biggest rivals in Washington and Oregon State. But Nix had his best season of his college career, throwing for 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns, while also rushing for 14 touchdowns. Oregon provided the best offensive line of his career, as they didn't allow a sack through the first 4 weeks. And also, they provided some of his best wide receivers throughout his career in Troy Franklin and Chris Hudson. Due to the performance last season, his Heisman hype has been boosted up, as during the offseason, his Heisman odds were a plus 200. Also, in New York City, he got his own billboard. And since this season started, he delivered on his Heisman hype, as the first game against Portland State, he threw for 287 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, it was against Portland State, but he will have other opportunities this season to prove himself. And as it stands right now, Oregon in the future will have a chance to play 5 ranked teams. The first starting against Colorado, the second being against Washington, the third being against Utah, the fourth being against USC, and the last one against Oregon State. Now, I don't know if he will end the season top 3 in Heisman voting, but what I do know is at some point during the season, he will be in Heisman talks. And if you got to the end of the video, like I said earlier, like and subscribe for more college football content.